Okay, welcome back to part 2 of this class. Now, what is the best approach to achieving a good shading? Yes, what is the best approach to achieving a good shading? What are the things do you think you need to put in place to drag you to chiaroscuro? Now, if this is the first class you're watching, we've talked about the part 1 of this class. So I would want you to go over and see the part 1 of the video so that you can actually understand where we are coming from now. So now we are looking at what actually can you do to help you achieve that chiaroscuro level, that chiaroscuro state, the state of completion, the state of the end point of shading, the climax. For the biology students, they will say the orgasm. Go and ask your biology teacher what that means. I'm just an art teacher. So now what will take you to that state are the things we are going to look in the course of this study. So now this is the part 2 of shading and shading techniques. So we are going to break this down in details on how and how not to, do's and don'ts, in order for you to achieve chiaroscuro. Now what's our objective? Our first objective, we'll define what is hatching. After defining hatching, we'll define the different types of hatching method, and then we'll look at cross-hatching. After talking about cross-hatching, we'll also look at pointillism, and then if time permits, we'll also look at tonal value, tonal gradation, and the impact of shading in a given work of art. That is our objective for this study today. First, hatching, cross-hatching, pointillism, tonal value. Then we'll define what tonal value is, which is as well as known as what? Tonal gradation. We talked about the dark tone, the mid tone, the highlights, and then the shadow in the course of this study. Now, first of all, let's look at hatching. What is hatching? Now, this is the application of tones from the light to the shade continuously by the use of strokes to bring out the solidity of form. Remember, when we talked about blurring, to bring out the roundness and solidity. For hatching, to bring out the solidity. That does not mean you cannot still achieve the roundness, but for this, the solidity is key. So if that is, now this implies, so okay, whenever you hear the word creating something that is solid, what are the things that are solid? Rock, stones, wood. So if you see woods, if you see rock, they are, you identify them with strokes, with lines. So that's exactly what hatching entails. So the word hatching, it is the application of tones from the light to the dark continuously by the use of what? Strokes to bring out the solidity of that effect. All right, so hatching is an artistic technique where lines are used to shade as exposed to what? As opposed what? To what? The smooth gradient as the smudging or the rubbing. So I don't know, sorry about that. I don't know if you understand what that means. Now, we use strokes for hatching. All right. Now, at the dark side of your shading, whenever you're shading at the dark side, the lines appear closer together. It's gradually what? Spaced out. When you start getting to the brighter part of it, it can be what? Interesting on structural objects with shapes and edges and forms. Now, when I mean structural objects, I mean objects that are what? Sharp, that are edged. Like I told you of what? Wood. You know, the mountain. They are straight, they are sharp. So you can use what? Strokes or hatching to represent this pattern of what? Drawing. Now, if you look, you will see an image of a box. Now, that explains what hatching is. The first shading method you see here is the first what is known as what? The hatching method. The lines are what? Open. Now, this other part, you know, they now introduce another kind of shading by this part, which we are going to talk as we proceed. And then if you look at the shadow are more closed apart together because it's a shadow. All right. So now it has been greatly explored by illustrators. What do I mean by illustrators? The artists, people that create, you know, caricature images and all that. So they have explored this cross-hatching kind of shading. By far, the two most important things about hatching are line qualities and what? The consistency. These are the two most important what? Qualities of what? Hatching. The line quality and what? The consistency of what? The shading. Now, what do I mean by the line quality and the consistency. Now, there are some places you need to press the nip of a pencil hard. That will enable you gain hard shades. While there are some places you need to be faint. And again, your consistency. How are you in shading? Are you just shading anyhow? No, you should be consistent. There are some images that the shading should go triangular as an angular. Some should go diagonal. You observe all that and then be consistent in doing that. So that's when will help you get towards chiaroscuro level. Now, rushing and creating unparalleled, unnatural, and uneven space line completely ruins the drawings or the hashing. So if you're just carelessly, unnatural, unparalleled, uneven, you're just doing anything anyhow, you produce something that is not what interesting. So you must be consistent, and then the qualities of line should be what accurate and very, very consistent. Now it changes its form, being a way to describe what form. Now to just looking like random scribble or a two-dimensional shape. So take your time and then use nice and even natural what lines, and be patient when applying cross-hatching. When you're working with cross-hatching, you just have to be patient. You understand? You don't rush into it. You take your time and then build your work from one precept to another. You'll be laying the blocks. It's like laying up of blocks from one like that. From one, you go, you come back. We have the first coat, second coat. The more you build, the more you're consistent, the more you produce an even work of what? Of art. All right, so look at these perfect examples here I just gave you. Now, if you watch this particular drawing, let me highlight it so that you know the one I'm talking about. This very one, you see the lines, they are very even, as against this man here, that the lines are just anyhow, goes. So there's no way you compare this particular drawing with this. This one looks more interesting and even more even as against this one in particular. All right. So now this is, like I told us, that it has been explored by a lot of illustrators. Now these are illustrated, kind of what drawing that is done by this particular artist. I've forgotten his name. So you see the images, how he took his time. You see the consistency of line. You see how the lines are consistent. You see, they're not just anyhow. It's well planned. Now this time he uses what? Cross-hatching. We are going to talk about cross-hatching as we proceed, but a lot of hatching. You see the strokes, they are consistent. He did not just draw strokes and then start drawing from this other angle. If he's going this way, he maintains it all through. If he's going this other way, he maintains it all through. He does not go like this, goes anyhow. No, he chooses his shading. Now if you look at the head of the lady that he painted, look at the strokes. You see how even it's going. So now this is known as what? It's known as hatching. And this is the hatching method of drawing. Imagine how beautiful this image looks. All right, now let's continue. Now let's look at the types of hatching. There are different types of hatching. Mainly there's 3 major different types of hatching. Now the first type of hatching we are going to talk about is parallel hatching. Parallel hatching. Now, parallel hatching is the first type of hatching we're going to talk about. After talking about parallel hatching, the next pattern of hatching we'll have is known as what? The cross-hatching. And then we'll now have what? The culture hatching. Now, these are the 3 major kinds of what? Hatching. The parallel hatching is the first hatching I just showed you. Now, I showed you hatching, which is the normal random kind of. Then we'll have the parallel hatching. Then we'll have the cross hatching. And then finally, we'll have the what? Culture hatching. So let's pick them one after the other and then talk about them individually. Now, parallel hatching. Now, it is simply the use of parallel lines to shade your drawing. Parallel hatching is simply the use of parallel lines to shade your drawing. Now remember, it's under what? Hatching. Using of what? Parallel lines to shade your drawing. The head of the drawing that the artist drew, he uses parallel lines, is a perfect example of what parallel hatching is. All right. The length of the stroke, density, and the line weight all play a role in describing the form of the object. Now, the length of the stroke, the density, the weight, they all come together to play a role on how the work will look like. Looking at the image you're seeing there, you're seeing the almost 3 or 4 different types of hatching. Now, the first one is the parallel hatching, the next one is the cross hatching, and then the other one looks like something like contour, but it's not that exact what contour. They're just trying to drive an idea here. What we are trying to say now is the major pattern of what? Hatching. which what we are discussing is the parallel hatching. All right, so now let's go over and look at cross-hatching. Now, what exactly is cross-hatching? Now, this is another interesting type of shading. It is the application of tones of interlacing lines in net-like manner. The previous image you saw, I think I should go back and show you. Now, the previous image you saw, this middle one, is exactly what we're talking about. This is the cross-hatching. You cross-hatch, you hatch, and then you go left, right, left, right, left, right. It comes out very amazing and very interesting in most work of art. Now remember, if you're using all this shading, you try to understand where this particular shading will work perfectly. You don't just use anything because you can use anything, but that does not mean you cannot use anything for anything. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. All right, so the first kind of shading, we've mentioned the different types of shading. We've talked about the blurring, which is the smudging, the smatto, or the smudging is the first one we discussed. We talked about hatching. Now we talked the different types of hatching. We talked about parallel hatching. Now we're looking at cross-hatching. Cross-hatching. All right. So cross-hatching is like parallel hatching, except new layers are added. With parallel hatching, let me go back. All right. Now with parallel hatching lines going in a different direction when you're applying cross-hatching. In cross-hatching, the lines are going in a single direction, but in parallel hatching, the lines are going in different direction, but they are consistent. They are not just done anyhow. It is consistent. Now there is no limit to how many layers that you can add to your given shading. You can shade until you've gotten to chiaroscuro standard. Until you get there, there's no point stopping. To some persons, I've seen a lot of artwork where the artist or the very student will shade and then get to a point when I'm tired, or you start shading anything or anyhow. No, it's like you're eating, and because of you're done eating, you start wasting the food. Who does that? If you're done, you cover the food. If there's a fridge, you keep it. You don't waste things. The same thing applies to what? To drawing. So we are tired of shading or tired of drawing, you cover it and leave it. You go and come back and then continue from where you stop. With that, you're getting into what? Perfection, or to the chiaroscuro standard of what? Drawing. Now look at this drawing of the lady. This is a perfect example of what cross-hatching looks like. You see the strokes of pen or pencil, how it goes helter-skelter. You see some of the lines, they're going the same way, the same proceeds, the same pressure, and then some other parts, they are going different ways, different proceed and then different pressure. So just bear that at the back of your mind that we have three major hatching methods. The first one is parallel hatching, we have the cross-hatching, and then finally we have the culture. All right, so now let's proceed and then see. All right, now let's look at culture. Now culture hatching also involves parallel lines. Only this time they all follow a culture to follow the culture of the object. What am I trying to say? Now, if you're drawing this mouse and then you look at the mouse, you should understand, if you're drawing this mouse for example, and then you look at this mouse, you should understand that there is a swollen here and there is a culture, there's a movement. So you don't just shade flat. No, you follow the culture. You understand the culture, you follow it, and then to achieve this, because if you shade flat, you automatically produce a flat image and it will give that feel of chiaroscuro. So these are the method and the ways in which you can actually achieve the chiaroscuro state. Now the result is a more natural look. If you follow the culture of things, the result will show you more natural look as against shading flat. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. Now look at this image. Now the artist follow the culture. Now the culture of the wood is round. So if you watch the strokes, let me zoom closer and then show you this. Now if you see the strokes, they are also moving towards that direction to give you that illusion that this is a log of wood that somebody can sit on actually. So that is that with that particular one. All right, now let's look at the next one. Now, culture hatching can also be combined with cross-hatching to create interesting effect. Now, you are not limited to using any of this shading. Sometimes you can use the 3 of them, sometimes you can use the 2 of them, sometimes you can use anything you can use. But these are the things you should put at the back of your mind whenever you are drawing. So drawing culture also helps us, to drawing culture and the use of cross-hatching to create this effect also help in providing that corkscrew effect in your shading. Now the next one we are going to look at is what? Stippling shading. Now the stippling kind of shading is very close to that of the pointillism. Now what's the difference between the pointillism and the stippling shading? Now both pointillism and stippling involve the use of small dots, and the difference between them is stippling is done in black, and in black pencils and pen, using them to stimulate shading, while that of pointillism uses colored dots, to make the entire piece of art. So which means stippling is like monochromatic, while pointillism is like polychromatic. So that's exactly what the stippling shading entails. Now this is a perfect example of a stippled work of art done out of dots and different dots. Now stippling requires a solid understanding of forms, light and shadow, and it takes time, and a very long time, as in it takes a very long time to create. But if you have the patience, it can result into a real unique and awesome work of art. Now it takes only someone that has the patience that can actually produce this. Now do you know what it means can you count the number of dots? So the number of dots here expresses the number of, will I use the word drum strokes or hands? Imagine your hands moving like this to create all those dots. It's amazing. It's a serious work. So that's why stippling takes a whole lot of time, to create. Now, just like with the hatching and stippling, just like cross-hatching or hatching, stippling requires 2 main things, which is first, patience, and then the second one is what? Consistency. There's no way you can create stippling shading without patience and consistency, because you get bored. You get bored, and then you get discouraged, and then you leave that. So the next one we're going to talk about is pointillism. Now pointillism, this is the techniques of applying dots on drawing or painting to show the effect of light and shade. Is the techniques of applying dots on drawing or painting to show the effect of light and shade. So that explains what pointillism is all about. Now these dots are done with nib of pencil or brush or even pen, but in painting the dots are done with the tip of your brush, with different tones of color and different sizes of brush to create that stipple effect or the pointillism effect. Now this techniques is developed by George Schwartz. So he's the very artist that developed this particular kind of pointillism in drawing. All right, so now this is the perfect example of pointillism. Now there's a popular painting of George Schwartz that is all over. You can just go browse it. The popular painting of a painting of George Schwartz of pointillism. They'll just bring it. It's about people sitting on a love garden, some with umbrellas, some swimming, some just. It's a beautiful work of art, but it's done with dots. Pointillism. All right. So the next one we are going to look at is known as what? The scribbling or scribbling. The scribbling or scribbling. Now, scribbling or scribbling shading is really fun and much faster than the other ones, as in much faster than the stippling and hatching, or even cross-hatching or parallel hatching, or any of the kind of hatching you want to think of. Now, it also creates really interesting and professional look of art. That if you can actually steady, as in put the patience, put the effect, and then create those works, you make a very good work of art with scribbling kind of shading. Now, what is scribbling? As the name implies, it is shading by scribbling, by scribbles. Shading by scribbles. So if you're shading by scribbles, automatically that's exactly what scribbles is all about. Now, using your awareness of forms and light and shade to scribble with different degree of density to create an illusion of form will give you an outstanding masterpiece. So you use the awareness of what you have as an artist, how you know how to draw. If you use those awareness, as in you use the knowledge you've acquired, then you now use it and you now adopt the act of scribble. You create a very good illustration, a very good work of art. But you cannot do that when you have not practiced the basic. Now that brings me back to telling us, for some of us who have not seen the video for drawing, I will advise you go back and check that video. It's an amazing video. You can actually get everything you need to know about drawing, and then not just being a good artist, but then pass, write your exams, and then pass with flying colors. All right, so this is a perfect drawing to show us exactly what scribbles are. If you watch, this is a triangle, and they just scribbled inside, to create the illusion of what? Highlights, dark tone. So the same drawing, they increase the number of scribbling to show the dark tones, and then now for this particular one, it came out very loud and bright, and you can even see the shadow effect of what? The shade. All right, so that is what Scribble it's all about. All right, unlike hatching and stippling, Scribble does not require patience. Get that? Unlike your, what's it called? Your CrossHatching, Pointillism, and name them, Stippling. Scribble does not require patience. It's something that anybody can do even while sleeping. You can just scribble around and then come up with a very good work. It's actually the opposite of them. Now, using swift and natural random scribbles, you build up an amazing form of art. Okay, now this is the end of today's class, and let's look at what we've talked about so far from the first from the first type of shading we discussed during the first part. Now we define what shading is. We talked about the types of shading. We talked about the shading techniques, different shading techniques. Now under the shading techniques, we talked about different types of shading, which we then talked about blurring. And I told you how you can use blurring, where you can use blurring, with what you can use the blurring for, and how can you go about what elements that will go well for blurring, hatching, cross-hatching, pointillism, to mention but a few. Now, in the course of this study today, we talked about pointillism, and then we also talked about what's scribbling. All that are the things we covered in this particular topic. All right. So thank you very much for being in class. So now we are going to answer some of this question I itemized here. The first question I have here is, what is hatching? What exactly is hatching? Now, I want to believe we all know exactly what hatching is. And the next thing I want you to do is, I want you to mention the two hatching techniques. You mentioned the two hatching techniques. What are the two major hatching techniques? There are about 3 or so. So give me the answer to that question. Now, thank you so very much. So now let's go into our exam guide, where we can actually try our hands on some of these questions, in preparation for your exam. Now, this is the popular word of the exam guide, where you can actually answer some questions, and then try your hand to predict based on what you have done so far, what your WEAC results will look like. You understand? Okay, now let's go. This is cultural and creative arts. We are taking a random question and then 60 questions. So let's move in and then see what we have. Yeah, now the first question we have is, imaginative composition means dash. In drawing, imaginative composition means dash. That is, we are talking about imaginative composition in drawing, but that's not the question we want to ask you. I want to ask a question that is related to shading. All right, so now let's see question number 2. Now, shading is otherwise known as dash in art. Shading is otherwise known as dash in art. A, beautification, blending, decoration, ornamentation, tonal value. What exactly is shading known for? Shading is known for tonal value. All right, so that's the answer for shading. All right, let's try some other question. The illustration below, okay, let's leave that. Okay, now let's look at question. Let's try question number 13. Question 13. Now, cross-hatching is a technique in shading used in dash dimensional work of art. Cross-hatching is a technique in shading used in dash dimensional work of art. A, 2-dimensional, B, 3-dimensional, C, 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional, 7-dimensional, and 6-dimensional. You should know that we use cross-hatching for 2-dimensional work of art, which is in painting and in drawing. Okay. Now, which of the following does not belong to this group of drawing? Which of the following does not belong to this group of drawing? In as much as we are talking about painting, we are talking about shading, but I think we should just attempt this question. For those of you that have not seen the video for drawing, go back and watch it and see that video. Now, imaginative composition. Which of the following does not belong to this group of drawing? A, imaginative. B, landscape. C, life. D, perspective. And E, seascape. So which one does not belong? Is it imaginative? Is it landscape, life drawing, perspective, and seascape. Which of the following does not belong to this group of drawing? Imaginative composition is a drawing, landscape is a drawing, seascape is a drawing, life drawing is a drawing, but perspective is not a drawing, it's a law. It's a fundamental law in drawing. Therefore, it does not belong to this group. Thank you for participating in today's class. You can practice more questions using the exam guide. Now, the app scores and give a detailed explanation of all the questions at the end of your practice test. Now, you can learn a particular topic of interest with different modes like study mode, mock mode, and practice mode. It also have other features that make learning fun. Now, it is a must-have for all serious students. Download the app from www.examguide.com if you don't have it yet. See you in the next class. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and then share this video to anyone you know that would benefit from it. Thank you, and bye-bye.